What if I told you that one of history's most shocking serial killers lived in a castle, commanded armies, and was once considered a hero of France? This is the true story of Gilles de Rais, a man whose name should be remembered alongside Joan of Arc for his military prowess, but instead became synonymous with unspeakable evil. In the year 1440, the people of Brittany whispered in terror about children who vanished without a trace. Parents clutched their little ones closer as darkness fell, knowing that somewhere in the shadows lurked a monster wearing the face of nobility. But what they didn't know was that this monster lived in plain sight, in the grandest castle of the region, and had once been their protector. Picture this. The year is 1429, and France is losing the 100 Years' War against England. The country is divided, desperate, and on the brink of collapse. Then, like something from a fairy tale, a peasant girl named Joan of Arc appears, claiming God has chosen her to save France. Standing beside her, fighting with legendary courage, is a young nobleman named Gilles de Rais. He's wealthy, handsome, and fearless in battle. Together, they achieve the impossible, liberating Orleans and turning the tide of war. Gilles de Rais wasn't just any soldier. Born around 1404, he inherited vast wealth and lands, making him one of the richest men in France. By age 25, he owned properties across Brittany, Anjou, and Poitou. His castle at Machecoul was a marvel of medieval architecture, with towers that scraped the sky and walls that seemed impenetrable. He lived like a king, surrounded by luxury that would make modern billionaires jealous. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. When Joan of Arc was captured by the English in 1430, something inside Gilles broke. The woman who had given his life meaning was gone, and with her went his purpose. He retreated to his castle, but instead of grieving quietly, he began experimenting with something far more sinister. The transformation wasn't immediate. At first, Gilles threw himself into extravagant living. He commissioned elaborate mystery plays, spending fortunes on costumes and sets. He maintained a private chapel with a choir of young boys, ostensibly for religious purposes. To his neighbors, he seemed like an eccentric nobleman dealing with grief in his own way. They had no idea they were watching a predator perfect his hunting ground. The first disappearances began around 1432. A young peasant boy who had been seen near the castle gates simply vanished. Then another, and another. Parents searched frantically, but in medieval France, missing children were often attributed to wolves, bandits, or simple misfortune. No one suspected the local lord, the hero of Orléans, the companion of Joan of Arc. But Gilles wasn't working alone. He had assembled a small group of accomplices, each playing a crucial role in his horrific crimes. His cousin Roger de Briqueville helped procure victims. His body servant Poitou assisted in the murders. Most chilling of all was Henriette and Corilote, two men who became his primary partners in killing. Together, they created a network of evil that operated for nearly a decade. The method was always the same. Children, usually boys between 7 and 18, would be lured to the castle with promises of food, work, or education. Gilles specifically targeted the children of poor families, knowing their disappearances would be less likely to trigger investigations. Once inside the castle walls, the children faced unimaginable horrors. Gilles would torture them, often for hours, before finally killing them. Their bodies were then burned in the castle's massive fireplaces, the ashes scattered to ensure no evidence remained. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how Gilles justified his actions. He claimed to be conducting alchemical experiments, searching for the philosopher's stone that could turn base metals into gold. He believed that the blood of innocent children held special properties necessary for his occult rituals. This wasn't random violence, it was systematic murder driven by delusion and greed. The scope of his crimes was staggering. Modern historians estimate that Gilles de Rais murdered between 80 and 200 children over 8 years. To put that in perspective, that's more victims than many of history's most notorious serial killers combined. He was operating on an industrial scale, using his wealth and position to create what was essentially a medieval murder factory. But even the most careful predator eventually makes mistakes. By 1440, Gilles had burned through his massive fortune funding his expensive lifestyle and occult experiments. Desperate for money, he began kidnapping children from increasingly prominent families. He also started dabbling in open witchcraft, consulting with supposed sorcerers, and conducting bizarre rituals that scandalized even his tolerant neighbors. The beginning of his downfall came from an unexpected source: a property dispute with the church. Gilles had sold one of his castles to raise money, but then tried to take it back by force. During the confrontation, he kidnapped a priest named Jean Le Ferron. This wasn't about murdering children anymore. This was about attacking the Catholic Church directly, and that was something medieval authorities couldn't ignore. The church launched an investigation, and what they found was beyond their worst nightmares. When Pierre de l'Hôpital, the Bishop of Nantes, began questioning witnesses, a pattern emerged that chilled everyone involved. Parent after parent came forward with stories of children who had vanished near Gilles's properties. Servants whispered about strange smells coming from the castle, about screams in the night, about their master's increasingly erratic behavior. On September 15, 1440, Gilles de Rais was arrested at his castle in Machecoul. The charges were staggering: murder, torture, heresy, and practicing witchcraft. His accomplices were rounded up shortly after, and under interrogation, they revealed the full scope of the horror that had been hidden behind castle walls for nearly a decade. The trial that followed was a sensation that gripped all of France. Gilles initially maintained his innocence, claiming the charges were politically motivated. But as witness after witness testified, as his own servants detailed his crimes, the evidence became overwhelming. Finally, on October 21, 1440, Gilles de Rais broke down and confessed everything. His confession was so detailed and horrific that parts of it were ordered to be read only in Latin to spare the sensibilities of those present. He described his crimes with disturbing precision, showing no real remorse, but rather seeming to relish the memory of his victims' suffering. He claimed to have found sexual pleasure in the act of murder itself, describing how he would sit on his victims' chests as they died, watching the life leave their eyes. The medieval justice system knew exactly what to do with monsters like Gilles de Rais. On October 26, 1440, he was executed by hanging and burning at the Buffet in Nantes. His body was partially burned before being removed from the flames, allowing for a Christian burial, a final mercy granted due to his noble birth and apparent repentance. But the story of Gilles de Rais raises uncomfortable questions that echo through the centuries. How does a hero become a monster? Was there something inherent in his nature that made him capable of such evil? Or was it the trauma of losing Joan of Arc that pushed him over the edge? Modern psychologists studying his case have suggested he may have been a psychopath whose condition was triggered by grief and unlimited power. The case of Gilles de Rais also highlights the vulnerability of children in medieval society. His victims were poor, powerless, and easily forgotten. Their disappearances went uninvestigated for years, simply because their lives were considered less valuable than those of the nobility. It's a sobering reminder that throughout history, the most vulnerable members of society have always been at risk from those who hold power. What's perhaps most chilling about this medieval true crime is how normal Gilles appeared to his contemporaries. He attended mass, gave to charity, and maintained the outward appearance of a pious nobleman. His neighbors saw him as eccentric but harmless. Even his servants, who knew more than most, kept his secrets for years. It's a pattern we see repeated throughout history. The most dangerous predators are often those who blend seamlessly into society. The legend of Gilles de Rais didn't die with him. Some historians believe his story influenced the fairy tale of Bluebeard, the nobleman who murders his wives and hides their bodies in a secret chamber. The parallels are striking: a wealthy aristocrat, a castle filled with secrets, and a room that must never be opened. It's possible that this real-life monster's crimes were so shocking they became embedded in our collective cultural memory. Today, Gilles de Rais is remembered as one of history's earliest documented serial killers. His case predates many of the forensic techniques we take for granted, yet medieval investigators still managed to build a compelling case against him. They relied on witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and ultimately, his own confession to bring him to justice. The story of Gilles de Rais serves as a dark reminder that evil can hide behind any facade, that power without accountability corrupts absolutely, and that the most innocent among us are often the most vulnerable. From the heights of heroism to the depths of depravity, his tale remains one of the most shocking true crime stories ever recorded, a medieval nightmare that continues to fascinate and horrify us nearly 6 centuries later. Thank you for watching and for joining me as we revisited one of history's darkest crimes. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a journey into the shadows of the past. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, the past is never really gone.